New to Abyssal Deadspace in EVE Online, I'd like to showcase the absolute minimum requirements for a ship to achieve a 100% survival rate in Tranquil Abyssal Deadspace as a Caldari pilot. This is my fourth and last video on Tranquil Abyss, so I'll be collecting my thoughts into this one comprehensive video so that new players can get a full understanding of what Tranquil Abyssal Deadspace is. It's going to be a longer format, but I hope you find it useful all the same. When creating the fit, I wanted to know how soon a player could begin running Tranquil Abyssal Deadspace. Ideally, the fit would cost less than 10 million ISK, as well as take a day or less to train, since most new players will start the game by doing the tutorial and then the 5 career agent mission sequences, which take about a day to complete and reward the player with 10 million ISK, and a few ships. I'm also looking for a viable fit that does not require a 1 million skill point referral code, because some players don't use that when creating a fresh new account, and I'd like to cater to the worst case. Though if you're watching this and have yet to create an account, there's really no reason not to use a referral code because it saves you 40 days worth of alpha training and you can distribute the skill points however and whenever you want. I also feel I have to mention that when I say 100% survival rate, I don't mean the ship is invincible, I simply mean that it has the faculties to defeat every possible encounter. So, to the contrary, it's a ship that just barely works, but works well. With that, let's look at our options. On a big picture level, the Abyss can be cleared with 3 classes of ships: frigates, destroyers, and cruisers. We're going to throw out the option of running cruisers right away because, well, if you look at any cruiser, just the cost of the ship itself takes up our entire budget, not to mention all the skills required before you can even pilot one. So, how about frigates? Both online and in the game, most players will recommend clearing the Abyss with a frigate. There's even a Punisher fit listed in the official community fittings that touts the ability to clear the tier above Tranquil. This is where I started looking during my research as well. It's a great option as solo frigates earn more in a single clear compared to destroyers and cruisers, and as long as you have the skill points to back it up, frigates are a cheap, fast, and safe option. Though I need to mention that without those half-decent combat skills, you will achieve about a 99% survival rate instead of a 100% due to one pesky rare enemy called the Skybreaker Sparrow Troop. Veteran players may not even realize that this ship is an issue, but it destroys newbies who are unsuspectingly ill-prepared. So frigates are a fantastic choice as long as you have access to better combat skills or are okay with losing your ship about 1 in 100 runs. You can earn decent money either way. Personally, I feel uncomfortable recommending something that only works most of the time. I want it to work all the time, since a ship with even 1% chance of running into something they're not equipped to beat means someone out there would inevitably lose their ship on their first try of no fault of their own. So for my own sanity, I had to keep looking. In Tranquil Abyssal Deadspace, there's usually only one enemy in each room, so even frigates can do fine on defense. It's damage they lack, since they only have 3, maybe 4 turrets. Well, destroyers have like 7 turrets, so doesn't that solve our issue? Yes. Yes, it does. The one weird choice I will admit to is recommending turrets. In higher tiers, missiles or drones are the go-to damage option because turrets don't fare very well against the higher tiers. But all new characters in EVE Online start off with basically 0 training in drones or missiles, meaning you have to train those skill trees from scratch. Turrets, on the other hand, have several skills already trained, meaning this ship is ready to go after about a day of training, rather than in a week or 2. It simply makes sense for new players to go with turrets until they get the chance to train other skills. Although the fit is the final build for the recommendation I'm making in this video, it's by no means the ideal fit for all levels of play. It's only the best fit for brand new Caldari players with extremely limited skill points. That said, it only gets more powerful with better skills, so it's not a bad idea to copy this build exactly until you discover ways to improve upon it. The ship we'll be using is the Caldari Cormorant. The Cormorant is a sniper destroyer that offers a 50% flat optimal range bonus to all equipped small hybrid turrets, which we will use to shoot enemies from further away without needing to quickly chase them down. How far do we need to shoot things, you ask? Well, here's a quick graphic showing the damage application parameters I'm trying to cover. The strategy for creating an appropriate fit boils down to this. Each enemy in the Abyss has a range of engagement they prefer to orbit in, and our 2 options are to be able to defeat them at that range or give ourselves the tools to get them into our own preferred range. though because some enemies move so quickly, it's much easier to match them at the intended ranges rather than try to outpace their movement. For us, we need to be able to deal good damage to enemies between 4 and 14 kilometers away. The turrets we'll be using are the 125mm Compressed Coil Gun Is. In general, we're looking for a turret that provides the right general parameters for tracking speed, range, and damage. Among the small hybrid turrets, the 125mm series railguns puts us closest to being at the right balance for the purposes of clearing Tranquil Abyssal Deadspace. By comparison, the 75mm series turrets offer too little damage, the 150mm series has too little tracking speed, and all three blaster turret types have too small of a range. To be truthful, the 125mm series falls short in all three of these parameters, but they're close enough that we'll be able to get it to where we need using other modules, provided that you take one of the more powerful variants. So 125mm Compressed Coil Gun I, or if you can afford it, 125mm Prototype Gauss Gun. For our ammo, we'll be taking two types, Antimatter Charge S and Caldari Navy Plutonium Charge S. Regular old Antimatter Charge S will be our bread and butter to clear most of the content quickly. It deals more damage than any of the other standard ammo types, and the 50% reduced range penalty is not a problem at all for most of the rooms. You shouldn't have to take more than 1,000 with you on any single run, but make sure you have enough before jumping into the next one. The second ammo, Caldari Navy Plutonium Charge S, is special faction ammo that offers superior range and damage to a regular antimatter. It's mandatory as a new player if you're following this guide exactly, and though it may seem expensive, you only need it for that one rare encounter, so keeping 500 on your ship in reserve should be good enough. I'll talk about this more in detail later in the video. You'll notice that the Cormorant has an 8th high slot that can fit a missile launcher. We're going to leave it empty for now and make do with just our turrets. Next, we'll jump over to our low slots. The first thing we'll do is equip one Vortex Compact Magnetic Field Stabilizer. This increases both the firing rate and damage of our turrets for a significant boost in damage. Then we're going to fit a small IA Enduring Armor Repairer. This is a module we can activate to restore damaged armor over time. It eats up the capacitor if you leave it on constantly, so keep that in mind. For our mid slots, we'll start by fitting a 1 meganewton Enduring Monopropellant Afterburner. Afterburners are active modules that substantially improve our maximum velocity while subjecting us to almost no drawbacks. Next, we'll fit a small compact lead-acid cap battery, which we'll use for the flat 132 gigajoule increase it provides for our capacitor. For our ship, that's a 19% increase. Our last mid-slot module will be 3 items rolled into one F12 Enduring Tracking Computer, 1 Tracking Speed Script, and 1 Optimal Range Script. The F12 Enduring Tracking Computer is a module that can be activated to provide small bonuses to tracking speed and attack range. They can also be loaded with scripts just like ammo, except they don't get used up, so you only need 1 script each. While the module is not active, the scripts can be unloaded or switched out as needed. The scripts each double their respective bonuses to either tracking speed or range, while reducing the opposite bonus to 0. In our case, we can choose between having 24% improved tracking speed or 12% improved optimal range along with 24% improved fall-off range. For our rigs, we'll equip 1 small EM Armor Reinforcer 1. This increases our armor's resistance to EM damage by 30%, pushing the total resistance to 65%. This will help us survive since almost all of the toughest encounters deal a majority EM damage. However, this rig comes with the drawback of reducing our speed, pushing our maximum velocity below 500 meters per second. Overall, it complicates the build quite a bit, but it's a necessary component for what I'm trying to achieve. For our last 2 rig slots, we'll round out our capacitor needs with 2 small capacitor control circuit 1 rigs. Each of these reduce our capacitor recharge time by 15% with no other downsides. Looking back at what we've made, this ship is balanced between being forgiving to use and being as powerful as possible. Speaking of which, this ship is not powerful enough to take into the Abyss until you have the proper combat skills. Luckily, it's not an exhaustive list to get there. We'll need to train Caldari Frigate from level 1 to level 3, which allows us to train Caldari Destroyer 1 so we can pilot the ship. We need Repair Systems 1 to equip the Armor Repair module, and we also need a bit of extra damage, so we'll take Small Hybrid Turret from level 1 to level 2, boosting our bonus turret damage an extra 5%, and finally Surgical Strike level 1, which increases our damage by 3%. So we only need to train 5 different skills a small amount, and by the time it's done training, our ship should deal about 110 damage per second when equipped with Caldari Navy Plutonium, which is good enough. The total training for these 5 skills as a Caldari pilot amounts to 4,912 skill points, which takes just under 28.5 hours to train. Okay, so now that I've talked about the build, which you can copy-paste from the description by the way, now we have to talk about which filaments this ship can be used in. In each tier of Abyssal Deadspace, there are 5 different filament types: Electrical, Firestorm, Exotic, Dark, and Gamma. Every filament type in the same tier contains the same enemies, but each filament type offers unique status effects that can either help you or hurt you depending on the ship you're using. For the purposes of this guide, the only type I recommend is the Tranquil Firestorm filament. The Firestorm filament type provides both you and all your opponents in the Abyss 50% more armor, as well as reduces thermal resistances by 30% across the board. The reason why Firestorm is the easiest is simply because the Skybreaker is a shield-based ship that does not deal any thermal damage, so Firestorm gives it the smallest benefits possible. On the other hand, we are an armor ship that deals a fair portion of our damage as thermal, so by using Firestorm we're making ourselves more powerful, while at the same time knocking down the difficulty of the hardest encounter. You're going to want to get your hands on a good number of these Tranquil Firestorm filaments, since we need 2 for every attempt. The easiest way to get them is simply to buy them in the market. If you don't want to buy them, the hard way to get them is to find them in data sites, but relic and data site exploration is an entirely different activity, so I won't be covering that here. I really do recommend buying them. They aren't all that expensive most of the time, and you make back what you pay for several times over. Of course, I understand if they aren't being sold at all near you. In fact, the most frequently asked question I get from these videos is, where can I buy all the items if they're not showing in the market? Learning how the market works in EVE Online is definitely one of the big pain points for new players, and it's completely understandable that not all of the exact modules I listed in the fit would be available in everyone's local market listings. If you've ever gone through the hassle of traveling to warp gate after warp gate, hunting down components for your ship one piece at a time, you'll know that it's not much fun, and it feels like a waste of time. You're not alone in that, because many players before you have thought the same thing. That's why in the early days of EVE, players decided on specific stations to do their trading in, so that if you need to sell or buy anything, everyone can do it all in one place. I'm not going to cover all of the trade hubs because, luckily, we're in the Caldari faction, and that means regardless of which school we started in, we're a short number of jumps away from a region called the Forge, which houses Jeddah, the largest trade hub in the game by far. I have no doubt that you'll be able to find every module I've talked about in this video here, as well as those Tranquil Firestorm filaments. It might not be the same prices as what you can see in the video, since that always fluctuates, but I'd be surprised if you couldn't find any regular item that was not being sold at all in the Forge region. If you're part of another faction, making the trip to Jeddah is also not a bad idea, it'll just take longer. So now we've covered the fit, the skills you need, what filaments we're going to use, and how to get your hands on everything, so let's hop in game so I can give you a live demonstration on how to enter the Abyss. Alrighty. Hey guys, I'm on the live server, I'm in Jeddah, and I figure it's just easier to show you guys in real time how to get into the Abyss, because it is a multi-step process, and just explaining it to you and using B-roll in the background might not be the best use of our time. I think it's faster to actually just show you. The first step we're going to take is make sure that we have everything we need. There are times when I've gone to do Abyssal Deadspace and I don't even have the filament in there. So make sure you have what you need. You need your ammo, you need your scripts, and you need the filament. We're a destroyer, so we're going to need 2 Firestorm filaments per run. And that's just because Abyssal Deadspace is fleet content, so if you were a cruiser, you only need 1. If you're a destroyer, you need 2. If you're a frigate, you need 3 per run. But you get appropriately scaled rewards. That's why frigates earn the most per run. looks like we have what we need, so we can go ahead and undock. If you've been doing it for a while, you might see your tracking script or your optimal range script is equipped, or maybe you have your ammo equipped already and this is completely fine. We'll go ahead and undock now. The first thing we need to do when we undock is we need to create an area in space that is far away from everything else. The first thing we're going to do is learn about the hotkey Control B that opens up the new location saving menu. So we can, let me just add an exclamation point so we can differentiate. We're going to make a spot in JITA. We're going to warp to any distant object, just any object that's pretty far away. You can go ahead and warp to it. And in the middle of the warp, like while we're warping, we're going to click the submit button. And when we do that, the moment we click submit, it's going to save the location we're at, even during a warp. And by doing it during a warp, we create, a space we can warp to that's in the middle of nowhere, which is what we need for Abyssal Deadspace. You can activate the warp, or you can access the warp point by going into people and places. That is a viable place to locate this. I simply like to use the hotkey L. That opens up this smaller menu, and it gives us exactly what we need. It just shows us the save locations in the solar system we're in right now. So we can warp to the location.
Warp drive.
We can edit the name if we want. I like to name mine Filament 1, Filament 2, Filament 3, and so forth. And you can reuse those names in different solar systems. That's completely fine. Anyway, so we have to double check now that we are in fact more than 1,000 kilometers away from anything else. Sometimes, even though we think we did it right, we haven't. Or maybe someone clicked it, click save location at the exact same time that we did, and they'll be right next to us. Maybe their abyssal trace is right there. It's happened to me before, as far-fetched as that sounds. But it seems like there's no one near us, so we can go on to the next step. The third step is to get ourselves into a fleet. And there's 3 ways to do that. If you go to your name in the chat window, you can right-click it, and immediately there's a Form Fleet With option. You can also click on the right-click the center HUD, Pilot Form Fleet With, or you can do the same thing on your ship. Right-click, Pilot, Form Fleet With. And that's what I'll do. And that does 2 things. It opens up a fleet chat, which we don't need, and it opens up a fleet, menu where you can do a whole bunch of fleet stuff. And we also don't need that because we're just going to run it solo. So we don't need that anymore. And that's it. Now we're ready to get into the Abyss. So we're going to right-click and use Tranquil Firestorm Filament. It's going to open up this window. We need to make sure that we have 2 destroyers selected, and not cruiser or frigates, because that's not what we are. It won't let us activate for fleet unless we have the right options selected. So make sure you have that selected correctly. Now we're going to activate the gate to the Abyssal Trace. And sometimes this window right here is finicky. You can either wait for the game to update, or if you want the game to force itself to update, to let itself know that, hey, you've opened up an Abyssal Trace and you're ready to go in, you can double click in space somewhere, make sure you're moving, and then control space to stop your ship so that you don't fly off into the distance. And that'll force the game to update. Maybe you can get into the Abyssal Trace faster. So we're going to click it. It's been a while, so we're going to get in the first try. No problem at all. And now what we're going to see is we're going to have to go through 3 different rooms. Each room is more or less the same. You can look around. There's some cool scenery if you, I think it looks pretty cool. But the thing that we need to look at is the overview. In the overview, you're going to see the same thing every time. It's going to be 1 loot cache, 1 warp conduit, and some number of enemies. You might see some other things in there, but don't worry about it. It's not that important. So the game plan is to we're going to go towards the loot cache, and that once we start moving, the enemies are going to lock onto us and start approaching us and orbit. When they do that, when they get close enough to lock on, we have to lock on. And then when they get close enough to shoot, so for us, the fall-off range is 15 kilometers right now. So when they get around that range, we can activate our turrets and we'll start doing damage. And that's basically it. So, okay, so looks like I stayed idle too long. They're going to engage me anyway. But we're going to approach the biocombinative cache, turn our Afterburner on, and you'll see that by the time we get there, the engagement should be over. So we're going to start activating the turrets when it gets about close enough. And the next thing that we need to do, of course, when the shield depletes and we start getting into armor, we're going to activate the armor repair. I'm just going to turn it on now so I can explain this next thing. The next thing we need to do is we need to check whether our tracking computer is better suited to increase our tracking speed or to increase our optimal range and fall-off range. So it's pretty easy to understand. If they're within our optimal range, then we can just activate the tracking speed script. If they're outside our optimal range, then we should activate the optimal range script. Right before it dies, if you see it's 8 kilometers, so we could have activated the tracking speed script and that might have applied a bit more damage. So we're going to lock onto the cache now and give it a few hits. And it will leave a wreck behind, just like any other ship you would normally destroy. The enemies in the Abyss don't drop wrecks ever. All of the loot you'll ever get are in these caches. So, oh, here's a good example of something that needs an optimal range script. So we're going to start with the same game plan approach, the biocombinative cache. Sorry, let me finish my earlier thought. The reason why I like to target the biocombinative loot cache last is because sometimes when you target it, you forget that you have it targeted, and you'll try to fight the actual enemy. And if you have it targeted first, let's say, you'll have your cursor targeted on the cache, and you'll be shooting the cache, which is, you know, some 30 kilometers away, and you won't be hitting anything. That's the easiest way to die as a beginner, just accidentally shooting the wrong thing and not doing any damage. So we're in a blue cloud, which makes us significantly easier to hit. We're in our armor, so I should have activated the armor repair quite a while ago, but that's what we'll be doing. And you'll notice the Ephialtes Lancer likes to attack us from outside of our usual range, so we will activate the optimal range script. So right now our optimal range is 9.3 kilometers. If we activate it, it is now 11 kilometers with our fall-off range being 17. So we'll be doing significantly more damage. You'll see immediately our damage, our average damage jump to the higher range of our damage numbers. So 250 to 300-ish, when before we were hitting 150s sometimes. And we don't really need to move. It's not all that difficult. This is one of the tankier enemies in the Abyss, so it is going to take a while. So that's why sometimes I do like to have more ammo in my arsenal, because if you have 3 of these in a row, you do need all that ammo to defeat the Ephialtes Lancers. So it's done, so we can go ahead and destroy the biocombinative cache. Loot and activate the gate. The origin gate is the one that tells you that we're all done and we're free to go home. There's a timer in the top left corner that you can always check if you're worried about time. It seems that we've cleared this in a little over 8 minutes, which is a little bit slow for us. As your skills increase, you should be able to clear this in 7 minutes or less. Let's just say 7 minutes on average. And before I get to the last part of the video showing you how to complete each encounter specifically, let me show you real quick how to sell the Triglavian survey databases. If you go to the market details, you should see a bunch of buy orders that are exactly 100,000 ISK, and the time that the buy orders last is about a year. That indicates that it's an NPC. These are the conquered NPCs that we're trying to sell it to. So to do that, we need to find a conquered station. One resource that you can find online in your web browser is this one. You can find it real easy like that. The closest one to us is Villain, so we're going to open up the map, F10, type in Villain, and set our destination that way. Another way you can find a conquered station is just to go back to the market details, right-click one of the buy orders, and set destination that way. And that should also get you to a close-by station. So what we're going to do when we're there is we're going to move the Triglavian Survey from the ship inventory to the item hangar. We have to do that because we can't sell the item while it's in our ship inventory. So item hangar, Triglavian Survey, you can right-click it and there should be a sell this item. That'll open up a window. Just make sure the sell price is 100,000 ISK and you can sell it. You'll lose a little bit in sales tax, but it's probably the best price you're going to get since the people who are buying it over in Jita are probably hauling it to stations like these to sell anyway. In Tranquil Abyssal Deadspace, there are 15 different enemies that we can run into. Some of them are more common than others. As you can see, there's the Striking Damovic, the Ephialtes Lancer, and the Needle Teslas that are very common. Some of them are much harder than others. Because we're equipped to defeat all of them, some of the weaker ones are really simple. The basic battle plan that I laid out can defeat them no problem at all. So I won't go into detail on every single enemy, but for the sake of the video, I'll at least mention all of them. Let's get right into it. The first one we're going to cover is the Skybreaker Sparrow Troop. I've been mentioning this one all video because it is the most powerful ship, but now that we have our fit, as you'll see, it's pretty simple to take it out. It just requires a few unique instructions. So the first thing we're going to do when we run into one is make sure we reload our turrets with the Caldari Navy Plutonium, and then we're also going to reload our tracking computer with the optimal range script. If your armor is low, go ahead and turn on your armor repairer first thing, and you can just leave it on for the entire fight. Once you have those three activated, or two, you can, instead of approaching the cache, we're going to approach the Skybreaker Sparrow Troop directly. So approach the Skybreaker and turn on your Afterburner so that we're moving towards it as fast as possible. We're never going to catch up to it because we move slower than it until we get better skills, of course. So once the ship gets close enough, maybe 17 kilometers away, activate your tracking computer and your turrets. You'll notice that by this point, all 4 of our active modules are on. Go ahead and leave them on, cycling like that. And it does take a while, but that's basically the entire encounter. A lot of the difficulty of the Skybreaker is really setting up for it, and our fit sets up for it quite well. So this is all we need to do at this point. For the next 2 enemy encounters that I'm going to explain, I'm going to skip around the list I showed you. The next 2 I want to cover first because there's just a small extra detail that you need to know about each one, or else you can easily lose your ship. But it's easy enough to know that once you know it, I don't think you will lose your ship. So for the Striking Villademovic, it spawns with 3 drones, but you don't actually have to kill the drones in order to progress in the room. So if you see 3 fast-moving drones, just ignore them and go straight for the Striking Villademovic, and then and you win. Yeah. For the next one, let's talk about Lance-type Teslas. All Teslas have a precursor next to their name, so it's not going to be just Lance Tesla. It's like something Lance Tesla. I'll explain more in detail when I get to the Needle Teslas, but for the Lance Teslas, if you see a Lance Tesla, those deal ridiculously high damage, and they can do it from pretty far away. So when you see that, you have to go for the Lance Tesla first. If you don't, and say it's a an Ember Lance Tesla or a Blast Lance Tesla, then you have a high chance of losing your ship because we don't have a lot of resistances in those areas. So be sure to really read the name. If it has the word Lance Tesla in it, you got to go for that one first. The trade-off, though, is that Teslas are weak on the defense side, so they should go down pretty quick. Alrighty, what's next? Attacker Pacifier Sparrow Troop. Now, this enemy is a missile-based ship, and it fires thermal missiles only, so it deals 100% thermal damage, and it's an armor ship with an armor repairer. So it's using the same strategy we are, meaning that the difficulty of this encounter is quite inflated using the method that we're doing, because we're running Firestorm, and this enemy loves Firestorm because it gets bonus armor, it deals extra thermal damage, and so it's kind of on the same level as the other Sparrow Troop, which is the Skybreaker. But if you were to try other filaments, it would not nearly be as difficult. For the purposes of our ship, since we are running it in Firestorm, you are going to see it do a massive alpha strike. When it approaches you, it's going to fire a missile, and then it's going to fire another one, and then both of the first two hits are going to hit you at the same time. So don't get scared when you lose all your shield and half your armor right away. That's just how it says hi, I guess. Just be sure to turn on your armor repair right away, because it's going to get you, and it should be a fairly simple encounter. The next one is Devoured Hunter. Devoured Hunter is also one of the stronger ones. This is a hard-hitting turret ship, and it moves slowly, but it has a very long range. It's going to shoot you much before you start shooting it. This is another one where instead of approaching the cache, I would recommend approaching or orbiting the target itself, because it does move rather slow. If you just book it to the cache, it's going to take a while to catch up, but it doesn't care. It shoots very far. Striking Damovic. This is the first common enemy that we're going to see. It spawns about 20% of the time. It's a pretty standard enemy. It has decent range. It shoots pretty hard. It has a pretty good tank. Its tank is a little bit better in Firestorm because it's an armor-based ship. But other than that, it's a fairly standard enemy. It has really good speed, so if you just go to the cache, it's going to follow you. You don't have to do anything special about that. Just make sure you're hitting the Damovic and not something else, like I mentioned before, and you should be fine. The next enemies, Lucid, Escort, and Lucid Aegis. These are fairly simple enemies. If you get to the higher tiers, then they do become a little more threatening, but in this tier, they're just by themselves, and so they're just another kind of trash mob. They shoot fast, and they deal a little bit of damage. Again, same thing as the striking Damovic. If you're not paying attention, they can do something. They're a little less threatening than the striking Damovic, though, so the same thing. You just pay attention. If they go out of range, maybe switch to your optimal range script. If they're being really lazy about range, you might want to approach them instead, because sometimes they do get really lazy about it. One enemy that's not lazy, though, is the Ephialtes Lancer. The Ephialtes Lancer is super agile, and he likes that 10 to 12 kilometer range. So you're not really going to catch up to him. Best thing you can do really is just go towards the cache, put on your optimal range script, and just fire at a distance, let him do his thing, because he really likes doing that. There's not much else to be said about it. The next one is, I'm just going to lump all of these in the same group. They're the Lucifer Series. So far, I've run into 5 different ones. There used to be a 6th one, Elite Lucifer Dramiel. I have not seen it in about a year. The last time I've seen that one was when I did my Coercer runs, like testing for the Coercer video, and that was a long time ago. Since then, I've only seen Lucifer Dramiel, the regular Lucifer Dramiel, Lucifer Echo, Lucifer Fury, Lucifer Medusa, and Lucifer Sword Spine. And I'm not going to go into all the details about what each one of them do. They all apply one type of status effect, and you'll learn what they are eventually. But in the Tranquil Abyss, they spawn by themselves. So whatever status effect they're inflicting, it really doesn't matter, because they're kind of pushovers by themselves, and they're the only ones in the room. So these all should be very easy. The one thing I'll note is some of them, like the Lucifer Medusa especially, get really lazy about range. So if you're trying to go for the cache, they'll kind of circle around you, and then they'll just kind of let themselves drift off into the distance. I've had one Lucifer Medusa go as far as about 18 kilometers out before it decided to come back to where I was. They're not particularly threatening, but it does get scary having them so far away and you're not dealing any damage and they're still dealing damage to you. So I would, keep an eye out. Maybe you want to approach or orbit them instead of just going straight for the cache sometimes. It should be fine though. And finally, we get to the last one I need to explain. These are the needle Teslas. And some of this stuff it's going to apply to the Lance Teslas as well. So for both Lance Teslas and needle Teslas, they spawn in 4 different varieties. And each of the 4 varieties deal 100% of their respective type of damage. So for EM damage, you have the Spark Tesla. All right, so you'll have Spark Needle, Spark Lance Tesla, and that applies for all of them. You'll have the Ember Tesla, which deals thermal. You have the Strike Tesla, which deals kinetic. And you'll have Blast Tesla, which deals explosive. The type of damage that they deal, it does matter. Like I said, for the Lance Teslas, if it's a damage type that you're particularly weak to, you should focus that one first, if you can. So let's say you're in a room with 3 needle Teslas. We're really weak to thermal. So if you find an Ember needle Tesla, maybe you want to target that one first. And then something like, I don't know, Strike needle Tesla are pretty low priority. We have decent resistance to strike. So they deal really good damage, but their range is really short. So we do need to turn on that tracking speed script and turn on the tracking computer. Otherwise, we do have a really hard time hitting these. If you don't turn on the tracking computer, it could take like 5 minutes to actually take these down because we deal so little damage. But that's why we have the tracking computer. With it on, these should really be no problem. The only thing that I would say you might want to do is, since there are sometimes 3 that spawn, you might not be able to finish all of them off by the time you get to the cache. So when you get to the cache, the best thing to do is to orbit the cache maybe 2.5 kilometers so that you're always moving and not standing still. Because when they're in their range, they do decent damage. And that's it. If you've watched the whole thing, well, first of all, thank you for watching the whole thing. I'm hoping you learned something. If you actually got something out of this video, that's good enough for me. This is mostly just for me to wrap up my thoughts and put it out there, and I did that. So yeah, if you like it, let me know, and thanks for watching. This is not an EVE Online channel, by the way. Just making that clear. All of my most popular videos are EVE Online stuff, and I'm glad you guys eat this stuff up. But I will be doing other things. Thank you so much for all of you who've been with me through all of this mumbo jumbo of not uploading regularly at all. There are many subscribers that I have, over 500 that just came for these random tutorials. And I'm really thankful for that. But yeah, I'm not an EVE Online channel. I'm just the guy who thinks a lot. So that's the outro. Yo, that looks so cool.